Paul Vachon is a nonfiction writer who's been writing professionally for almost 2 decades. His articles have appeared in consumer magazines and business publications and trade journals. He's also written 4 books on Detroit, Michigan history and revised and edited 2 travel guidebooks. So, a very busy man. Paul, thank you so much for taking the time with us today.
Thank you for having me, and best of luck with your podcast project. I think it's really exciting.
Thank you. I said with us like it's the royal, the royal we, but with me. So I appreciate this. So, Paul,
Hmm.
we kind of covered what you write, but
Hmm.
it seems like it is almost completely history based. Is that correct? Or am I missing something?
Um, it, Not entirely, but predominantly. My books fall in one of two categories, and that certainly is local history. But then I also am in, I say editor slash author because I revise these regularly, travel guidebooks to Michigan that's published by a publisher in California called Avalon Travel. And they have two titles on the state of Michigan. One's on the entire state, and the other one is just on the Upper Peninsula. And I revise each one of those every 3 years. And actually, I'm in the process of working on the Upper Peninsula one right now. So that, again, that's a different genre, if you will. That's travel. But then the rest of my books are local history related. But on the freelance side, it could be anything. I've written, articles for. I wrote an article once about the that doesn't exist anymore, but it was the reader mentoring program that was going on in the Detroit public schools at the time. And then I wrote another article once about um, a recycling program, I think, in one of the local communities. So it's pretty much open.
Do you get assignments to do that, or do you pitch specific topics to publications,
I,
organizations?
for the most part, I pitch. And now there have been times when I've had certain clients in the past where I did get assignments. Now, at one time, I wrote for a trade magazine that serviced the retail industry because I prior to becoming a writer, I worked in retailing for about 20 years. And it was published by the National Retail Federation. I used to get an assignment from there every month, but they stopped publishing the magazine a few years ago, so they went to work. But I have at times in the past gotten regular assignments from different markets.
I have to say, a lot of writers are going to be envious hearing this because you get paid for your writing. Yay.
I do. Mhm, mhm.
So let's get to the history. What draws you to that?
Well, I think it's because I grew up here in the Detroit area. I've lived here all my life. Um, I grew up in the suburbs. However, when I started college, at the time I was it's hard to believe it now, but I was a Catholic seminarian, and I attended college at Sacred Heart Seminary College on the west side of Detroit. It's in a fairly rough area. It's at Chicago Boulevard and Linwood Avenue. And because I was in the city, I got interested in different aspects of the city, the rough areas, obviously, which I was confronted with every day, but also the more um, um, stellar aspects of city life. The cultural resources, some of the shopping, which was still downtown at the time, although it's since returned, things like that. So I saw the good and the bad, and I knew that there had to be a whole lot of backstory going back decades and if not centuries that was responsible for that being the way that it was. And I became enamored with that, and that's really what drew me to it too, because Detroit is the oldest permanent settlement between the Allegheny Mountains and the Mississippi River.
Oh, I did not know that.
It's about 100 years older than Chicago, and there's a lot there that is just not real well known. And it's well over 325 years old now. So that's or it will be this summer. So that is so massive because Detroit went from a military outpost in the 18th century to an industrial town in the 19th century to, of course, the automotive capital in the 20th century. And each one of those chapters has its own compelling story, and each one built on what went after it. And I'm very, very much interested in that too. Of course, I'm 66 years old, and I've seen things change in the city, both good and bad, during my years. And I am not like a lot of typical suburbanites that are just, oh, Detroit's a hellhole and all this other stuff. I like to analyze things on a more, I don't mean to be snobbish when I say this, but intellectual level, and see how things really got the way they are. And one of the most telling books I ever read on the subject was by a historian from, I think, the University of Pennsylvania. His name is, or Princeton, Thomas Segru, and he wrote a book called The Origin of the Urban Crisis. And it's race, poverty, and inequality in post-war Detroit. And when you look at it critically, and you can see all the factors that went into how the city changed beginning in the post-war era until, well, pretty much the present. And it's really, when you see it put together in a way that is systematic and well laid out, you can trace the chain of events that happened, and you can see the causes for many of these things too. There was a horrible amount of racism, and that was largely responsible for many of the things that happened. You had restricted deed covenants and house deeds. You had insurance company redlining. You had just de facto racial segregation too. Sometimes local community institutions would play a role in it. Some churches did. There were Catholic parishes where the pastor would very subtly ask people in his parish not to leave, because if they leave, someone that African Americans that might come in are probably not going to be Catholic, so that will hurt their collections and so forth. So there were a lot of vested interest work too. So all of that together is, I see all the moving parts to it, and it fascinated me, and that's why I wanted to research it and write about it. And
Well, you
I
want
haven't always done it on as deep a level as I'd like, but I've tried to treat it with the respect that it deserves. Let's put it that way.
you've given us the broad strokes, and you obviously have a broad view of it, but how do you choose specific topics within all that?
Okay, well, the books that I wrote were usually specific topic areas that were suggested to me. For example, I wrote a book called Legendary Locals of Detroit, and it was biographical sketches of people who have had significant impact here. That was a new series that the publisher I was working with at the time, it's Arcadia Press in South Carolina, they were rolling this out around different cities around the country, and they asked me to do a Detroit iteration of it. And I admittedly did stretch the idea of what a local is a little bit, because sometimes I would talk about people who were not from here but had major influence here and did something here. Like, for example, I included Diego Rivera in it. Well, he was from Mexico, but he's so identified with this area because of his famous murals at the DIA.
That every school
And so,
child sees, yes.
yes, absolutely. So I did that. It was, and the book was a cross section of different people who had impacted different areas: the arts, sports, religion, commerce, politics, etc. And then I have a chapter at the end called Demagogues, Disruptors, and Dissidents. It's actually, I call it the Scoundrels chapter. Not all history is for the good. There were some scoundrels here, and I have a few people, not so nice people, unsavory people profiled in that chapter. But that's one book. And then the book I just finished, which will be out sometime this year, was also suggested to me, and it's going to be on the homes of the auto barons. This is with a publisher I have not worked with before. They're located in Pennsylvania, and they put out some very high quality books. And I finished the book back in last summer, so but it's in production now. This has to be the single most laborious project that I have done in my writing career. It's not the longest, but it was by far the most labor intensive in terms of having to go all kinds of places to research things, having to go in the field and take pictures, having to just do untold number of hours of internet research and things of that nature. It was just, it just, I didn't track the time, but I'm sure it was in a huge number of hours and so forth. So that I think is why I am so very proud of it, because I put so much of myself into it. And I'm really going to be excited for when it comes out too. So
Would you ever like to work with a research assistant? And it sounds like you take the pictures yourselves for your projects,
I, for the most
photography.
part, I do. Now, for that book, though, I took some of the pictures. I did get pictures from other sources. I found out one really cool source is because some of the homes are kind of historic. Is I contacted some area real estate agents that had listed some of these houses recently, and they have, of course, they hire professionals usually to take these pictures. And there was about 4 or 5 of them in the book that I got illustration or images of in that manner. There were others that I got from historical archives. Some charged me for them, some did not. And then of course I took some myself too. It's about maybe half of the pictures I took myself, the other half came from third party sources. That's roughly the breakdown. And so I was working with it. Now, as far as working with a research assistant, I've never really done that before. And I'll be honest, the reason is I don't have the money to pay a research assistant. But if I were to do something on a much higher level and I got like a big advance or something like that, I would consider it, certainly. Yeah. So,
Now, let's back up a little bit because this is fascinating to me. It sounds like you were on your way to becoming a priest if you're studying the
mhm.
seminary. Then later on, you went to work in the real retail industry. How
Right.
did you get started on your writing career?
Well, first of all, let me just the reason I left seminary is because I wanted to get married. Okay, I met my wife, but I did worked in a few different industries until I got into retailing, and then back in 2008, at the time I was working for Gorman's Furniture, and that was when the big recession came along, which I'm sure you remember,
Oh, yeah.
and I got laid off and I needed something new to do. And this is something I had always wanted to do, so I gravitated towards it, started doing it. So that was really how I fell into it, basically.
So bad
I had taken,
circumstances. I'm
I'm
sorry,
sorry.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just going to say, kind of bad circumstances gave rise to a new career for you.
Yes, that's very accurate. Yeah, yeah. I had taken a couple adult ed classes in it beforehand, but for the most part, I was able to draw on the skills I learned in college. I have a liberal arts and philosophy degree, but also since I was so exposed to the city as I was in school, that's what fueled my desire to write about it later on. And so those circumstances just kind of lined up in a way that was very fortuitous, you might say.
Paul, who reads your books? I mean, do you have demographics on that? Do you keep that
I
person in mind when you write?
Yeah, I don't have any demographics on who reads them. However, I can say that when I sometimes just sell individual copies at book events, or there's one promoter I know who stages art fairs, and sometimes he'll have like an author's tent as part of his art fair. And I've sold my books at some of those too. And typically, when I sell books at those, I usually meet people who buy them as gifts for other people. If they know someone in their family or a close friend who might have a strong interest in this type of thing, they'll buy it as a gift for them. And sometimes they buy it for themselves too. Just people who have an interest in what I'm what I'm offering now. They seem to be kind of cross sectional in terms of age, gender, race, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe it might skew a little bit older because some of the older people are can remember many of the things that I talk about, but not exclusively by any means too. It's really a kind of a mixed bag, you might say. So.
You said you've been to book events. What is that like?
Those are fun. It's uh, I couldn't. Well, I haven't done it much in the last couple of years because when COVID hit, it kind of pushed all of those off the radar. But book signings that I might be the only author at, or maybe one of a group of authors, would often take place at, say, area Barnes and Noble locations. And I might be asked to take part in that, or sometimes I might be even I might, if they have a new book coming out, I might approach them and ask them if I can do an event at their store, and they'll usually say yes, and so forth. But and then sometimes I actually done presentations too. I also do a lot of speaking, mostly at public libraries to promote my books, and I have PowerPoint presentations based on each individual title that I can present, and that's a great way to generate interest and so forth. So I do that as well. But now there are some book events that are massive and where I was just one of a whole slew of authors there, or retailers selling books, because sometimes these book events make their bread and butter off of selling used books, and you'll have a used book dealer there, not so many authors as such. And the people that come to those are more interested in the used books, not the new ones. So I try to avoid events like that now. I think I went to one or two of them, and it didn't work out too well. So I stay away from them now.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
there's lots of different stripes of events.
Does
So
not sound like a fit, but I'm fascinated. I'm taking notes here. You make presentations in libraries. That's a great idea for what the
yeah, yeah, it
that
is.
you're writing.
Yeah, and in fact, I haven't done it in a couple of years, but the group called the Library Network, which is a consortium of all the public libraries um, in Oakland and Wayne counties. They'll The librarians get together every, I think it's October, and they have a big meeting together, and they call people like myself who are interested in offering presentations, and we kind of do an audition, if you will. And you know, and it might be an author, it might be sometimes a small group that wants to do some entertainment or something like that, and they'll again audition for there, and then they can get calls. And I've been to some of these, and I've actually signed up speaking dates right on the spot too, and it's in some cases. And so it's been pretty advantageous.
Well, you have written a number of books. Is there one that's your favorite? And if there is, why is it special to you?
Well, I'm cheating a little bit by giving you this answer because the one that's my favorite hasn't been published yet. It's my new Otto Barron's book. I don't even know what it's going to look like. I haven't even seen a layout yet, but I know the images that are going to go into it, and I know the text that's going to go into it. And so I'm saying this a little bit on faith because again, I haven't physically seen it, but because I had to just um, put so much of myself into it, I it's an extension of me personally, and that's why it's special to me too. Not that the others aren't, but this one just in a very unique, very intimate kind of way.
I kind of asked you to pick your favorite child, didn't I? Shame on me.
Yeah, well, yeah, I only have one child, so it's easy. but,
Well,
but
that part's easy. Uh,
yeah, yeah.
what is your process? Do you write every single day? Do you have a word count that you set yourself that you must reach?
Mhm. I do not write every single day, and partly because my life is very um, fragmented. I have to do things here, things there. For example, my mother is going to be 95 years old tomorrow, and January 21st. So I'll give the date here. And I have taken her to take grocery shopping, doctor appointments, things like that. I'll do that. I'll I work part-time as a tour guide also too, and I'll have to commit myself to that. So, and then I have, different personal appointments and such. So I'm basically days are a big hodgepodge of all these things coming together. Now, if I have a day when none of those things are occurring, well, then I can do something. And I will typically right now when that happens, I'm catching up on the revision I'm doing on the Michigan Upper Peninsula book I just mentioned. So that's what I'm doing right now, and that's revising. That's really not writing per se. I'll change sentences here and there and so forth, but for the most part, it's checking to see if a restaurant in Sault Ste. Marie is still operating by clicking on their website or something. It's stuff that's a little more mundane, but it's part of the book and it has to be verified and so forth. I want to get since maybe the holidays or so, tours kind of wound down. And although I did do one earlier today, but that's unusual. This time of year isn't a lot of them. So I'm going to have a little more time coming up, and I want to maybe start doing some more personal journaling also too. And I had an idea about a personal memoir I want to write, and I also had an idea about a comedic novel I want to write too.
Oh,
And I've never written anything fiction before, so this would be new. And it I could tell you off camera or something like that, but it's something that I've been poking around Google on, and I found out enough about this idea that it could be pretty funny, and so I'm going to. It's on my to-do list. Let's put it that way.
you do
So,
not have to divulge just yet
mhm,
what it's about. It
yeah,
sounds like it's still
yeah,
in the sort of embryonic stage, but maybe
precisely.
you'll come on the podcast at some future date and talk about it, maybe when it's
Absolutely. Yeah,
finished. So that's a big
absolutely.
jump for you going from nonfiction to fiction.
It is, yeah, and again, I don't even know if it'll ever be publishable or anything like that. Now, one thing that a lot of writers do is they often self-publish books. I've never self-published. All my books have been with traditional publishers. Now, if I were to do something like that fiction, it may very well have to be that way. But I've never self-published. Now, sometimes, and it's kind of an outdated attitude, is some people will think, well, people that self-publish do it because they're not good enough to get hired, to get hired by a regular publisher. Well, there might be a kernel of truth in that, but for the most part, no. It's because they have an idea that is not necessarily welcomed by your big name publishers. They're not interested in it. So, but that doesn't necessarily mean there might not be a readership interested in it. So they'll go that route. Now, it's a lot more challenging because the marketing is all on the author, and they have to pay to get the books published and so forth. Now, sometimes there's a model called print on demand, which can reduce the cost of that too. But that's not as profitable. So there's pros and cons there. But like I said, I've never really personally been involved in that end of the business. I've worked with traditional publishers, and also I have never worked with a literary agent either. I've
Oh,
just represented myself. So I guess I'm unusual on two counts because of that too. So
you are
uh,
unusual.
I
You work with
yeah
editors.
yeah I do. And one thing I've gotten pretty I think because it hasn't come back to bite me at all. Proficient at is evaluating contracts when I get the contract before I sign it. The first time I ever did it, I did consult with an attorney in intellectual property who was skilled in that. But since then, I haven't done it. I've done it myself, and I know if what clauses to object to, and in most cases, the publisher will say, "Okay, we'll take that out." I've had publishers that say, "We want your first right to refusal on the next book you do after this one with us." And in fact, that's what this last publisher did, and I objected to that, and I
What does
said
that
that's got to
mean,
go.
Paul? Spell it
That
out
means
for
that
those of us who might
yeah,
encounter that.
that means that if I want to do another project after the one I'm working on, And I have to, if that clause were still in effect, I would have to approach that publisher about it and propose the idea to them before I could talk to anybody else about it.
Ooh.
Yeah, and I wanted that taken out, and they did take it out. I had another one, those with the travel guides that I do, that um, they said that I couldn't write a travel guidebook for any other travel guidebook publisher about any location anywhere in the whole world.
Oh, for heaven's
Well,
sake.
I objected to that and they took it out too. So I mean, yeah, the guides I'm working with them on are about Michigan, but if all of a sudden some competitor wants me to do a guidebook on Miami, Florida or something like that, not that they would, but I mean, they wouldn't, so but so that I conceivably now could do it because I got that clause removed. But I know how to spot these things, and that's worked to my advantage.
That is extremely useful, I think, for me to hear and hopefully for others to hear too. Now, you may
Mm-hmm.
have already answered that with your idea about writing a comedic novel, but what is your dream project? Do you have one?
It's as much as I like that idea, that's not it. My dream project, uh, well, I'll give you two, one on the book side, one on the freelance side. My dream project on the freelance side would be to get an assignment from the Atlantic magazine, or maybe the New York Times, or a big, very very impressive market like that. On the book side, I would love to get a contract to write a book for Wayne State University Press. They write there's a lot of good local books that they put out, and I have talked to them a few times, but they were not interested in what I was proposing. So now they might. The last two publishers I've worked with, I had not even heard of those publishers before I worked with them. They had seen my previous work and came to me and asked me to write for them. And that's happened twice now. The publisher that's going to publish my Auto Barons book, I had never heard of them before. They came to me about 2.5 years ago and asked me to do this book. So I was honored, of course, quite flattered, and so it worked out that way. The editor that I'm working with there, she happens to be from Detroit, and um, we have a pretty good rapport and so forth. And she's been pleased as punch with everything I've sent her and so forth. She did ask me to retake a few of the pictures I did, but that was no big deal. And but the text, she absolutely loved it. So.
Oh, that's wonderful. It sounds like a good working relationship.
Yes, and this publisher, from the impression I get from all the literature, they send to authors and so forth about, guidelines and such, I got the impression that they're pretty picky, because they kept saying in there, if X, Y, and Z isn't done, it will be returned to the author for it. Well, that didn't happen, and I have not, there is very little that I've, just those images, and that was it. But when I was doing that book, as I was putting it together, I got a lot of extra ideas to include with it, because one of the things I did is I designed in Google Maps a map of the Detroit area that points where a lot of these homes were located. That's one thing. And then I also did a big family tree of the automotive families and related families, because many of these families married into each other. And you can see how different people were. Like, for example, William Clay Ford, who is deceased now, he was the owner of the Detroit Lions. Well, he married into the Firestone family. His wife, who's still living, was a granddaughter of Harvey Firestone, the tire magnate. And that's why for many, many years, Ford cars always came with Firestone tires. So
Sounds like
yeah.
European royalty where they're all marrying into each other's
It,
families
it, it's
or business
it's kind of
arrangement.
like that too. It's kind of like that. There was another family here in Detroit, called you're probably familiar with the Buell building downtown.
Yes.
Well, there was a Buell Ford family. Now, the Fords there is not the automotive family, Henry Ford. However, Henry Ford's son, Edsel Ford, had 4 children. He had Henry II, Benson, his daughter Josephine, and his son William Clay. his daughter Josephine married into the other family. So her last name after she got married was still Ford. She married another man whose last name was also Ford. So yeah, it's
Wow.
yeah. There's all these little angles and things like that. When I oh gosh, when I was writing about what was the largest home in Grosse Pointe, it doesn't exist anymore. It was the home of Anna Thompson Dodge, who was the widow of Horace Dodge, one of the original Dodge brothers. And she built a home on Lake St. Clair that was styled after Versailles in France. And as she got older, she got more and more paranoid. And every single door in that house, every single one, had a lock with its own unique key. Every single one. And if she would ever, and she was changing them all the time too. And if she ever traveled, she would oftentimes call her staff saying, change this one, change that one, change that one. And she even thought that her phone calls were being eavesdropped on. So she devised a code that she would use to speak to her staff when speaking to them over the phone. So, I mean, the eccentricities of some of these people are just mind boggling
You
too.
really
So,
uncovered some fascinating details about them.
yeah, yeah,
All those
yeah,
keys,
yeah.
that would have
So,
driven me crazy in a big mansion. Wow.
mm-hmm. Yeah, everything has had a separate uh, um, a separate key every door. Her personal suite, the bathtub in the bathroom was French porcelain lined in that. There was an elevator that was the walls in the elevator were covered with a fine Japanese silk. There was it's just astounding the excesses that some of these people went to. Um, then I also wrote a little sidebar in there about um, prohibition, the prohibition era, and about how some of these guys, even though they had to be respectable citizens and so forth, their public facing persona, um, they had their own stashes squirreled away in basements and things like that. And I found out about some of that and wrote about some of that too. So um, you'll have to buy the book. But,
Well, we are running out of time. I want to make sure to let people know where they can find you. I know you've got a
mhm,
website and it's
I do.
paulseanwrites.com and your
Yeah,
name.
it is. It is acting up a little bit right now. So the more reliable channel would be simply Amazon
Okay.
or Barnes and Noble,
And your
which
last
you
name is spelled Vachon.
correct.
And your books include Becoming the Motor City, a timeline of Detroit's auto industry, Detroit, an illustrated timeline, Lost Restaurants of Detroit, Legendary Locals of Detroit, you mentioned that, and Forgotten Detroit. And what is the
Mhm.
title of the Auto Baron one?
Well, the working title right now, which could change, is simply Homes of the Auto Barons. Now that could change, but that's the working title that we're going by at this time.
All right, so make sure you make a beeline for Paul's latest book and his other books. Even if you're not a Detroiter, I think history is so fascinating. I read a lot of
It
it.
is. It is. Yeah. I wish I could be more accurate as to the release date of the new book, but I don't have. I've told you everything I know. I don't have any other information to share right now. But
When you get it, I will add it to the show notes. So whenever someone
fantastic.
listens to this in the future, which people do tend to do with podcast episodes, they will see that release date on there. All right, but you can find
Okay.
Paul's books on Amazon. So thank you very
Yes.
much for taking the time to talk to me.
Thank you for having me, Maureen. This is wonderful, and I'm most appreciative and very happy for you too, and that you're doing this, and I wish you every success with it too. So,
Thank you. I love talking to writers.
okay.
All right. Bye, Paul.
All right. Take care now. Bye bye.